again, if we try to put all of our ego to one side, which is really hard when you're making a game and you're an expert, I'm guilty of it just as much as anyone else I've worked with or haven't worked with. And we think about what are we making? Who is it for? How does it fit into their life? So, I've got two children. I've got almost 4-year old and an 8-month old, right? So when I play games now, it has to fit in quite tight gaps. So the type of game I'm looking for needs to be very satisfying. I need to be able to resume it by, closing the app on my phone, opening it again. And it is a deep misery, let me tell you, when I found a game I love and I have exhausted it. I want it to keep going. Maybe that's one of the promises of AI that they could somehow extend,
Yeah.
Slay the Spire. So, if only the devs would make me some more content for Slay the Spire, that'd be a real dream. So keeping that in mind, right? When we think about our game, not our idealized view about how people might play games or how we play games, but how does it fit into their life? And again, that conversation we had a little earlier about the attention economy and how it fits, there's everyone will rattle off this anecdote about Clash Royale being so successful because it's the perfect length when you go to the toilet, which I think has some merit, whether it was deliberate or not. But there is great thinking there, right? There are a lot of pretenders to Clash Royale that have never broken through, and there are a lot of games before Clash Royale that broke through which didn't respect that you want to be able to enjoy all of the fun of the strategy and tactical gameplay of something like an RTS, but in 2 or 3 minutes. And to maintain that depth in 2 or 3 minutes and be able to snack throughout the day. So understanding that and building with those user behaviors and then building the game around that and the updates around it is really, really, really important. So let's take an example of Clash Royale. Right? If Clash Royale at some point were to add a 10-minute long mega game, which was hugely rewarding and really interesting, and maybe expanded more about the Clash universe and had all these other factors going for it, would it still not work because it doesn't fit into player habits for how they use it? How much can you motivate people to do something extrinsically versus how much are they motivated to do it intrinsically? And I think that jobs to be done framework is helpful in that way of thinking because we have to remember how people use our games and going back to those metrics, right? Understanding the frequency of your players and the custom nature of it. There will be some genre benchmarks, right? If you're making a match 3 or a merge 2 game, you are going to see some commonalities across all of those games. But you might find for yourself, I worked on a merge 2 game, and there were some games in that genre that were targeted more towards male. So there was like a medieval one, a fancy one, and they demanded a bit of a longer core game. And you've got to wonder if that was deliberate or not. But ultimately, it meant they had a kind of niche they could play upon, and that's very fitting for everyone making games. So, if you're making a sit down multiplayer game to play with your buddies and the session length is 10 to 20 minutes, how many are people going to play? How often are they going to play? What percentage of your audience are going to be able to play that often? Now you're building a game that can service all of those needs. Is it a game with its updates and its content cadence and its monetization levers that still works for the 20% of your audience that play once a month with their children and the 60% of your audience that play every evening after school? If the answer to that question is no, should it be? Are you tunneling in on that? Is that okay? Or should you try and find a way in which your game can be enjoyed? And that, yeah, it can be an appointment that people enjoy. It can be part of their lifestyle that, they keep coming back to. Because I think that's when you get excellent retention, right? Not just good retention, but you get to, I will use this product forever until it becomes irrelevant, doesn't work on my phone, and then I will keep my old iPhone in the drawer because it has transcended from fun toy to thing I do to part of who I am and who I speak to and how I socialize. And you have to start with that framework of understanding how players use it and respecting it. There's no point you making a game that people love to play in 5-minute bursts and then saying, season one, 30-minute battle royale mode. Don't start there. If you want to try that and you've got all the money in the world, fine. But for me, always coming back to the voice of the player, how they're using it, swimming with the tide, building with that in mind.
I think just listening to you, just thinking out loud, jobs to be done, and the idea of a user personas. It's almost like they're kind of the lines are being blurred because if a job is specific for a particular user segment or cohort of users, could you then argue that that could be made into a user persona and is very much just the persona way of communicating what is specifically that job that the game is doing? I feel like I'm coming full circle here because
Yeah.
in class I teach about personas, but
Hmm.
I realize these two are linked because like the job is kind of very specific to almost the persona himself and who is
100%.
likely to have that job.
The best,
Uh,
the best, user stories. Some people are going to like them. I myself like them sometimes, and other times not. It depends on how you work in the team. They're not very gamey, so not everyone enjoys working with them. Might prefer a blue sheet or product spec or just a game design document. But the best user stories, the user is evidence based. It's not as a busy mother, I want feature X. It is, we know our audience contains these people. We can be confident enough that, either we have segmented them or we have other evidence that says as much. So that then when you say it, you say, as this player segment, this persona, I want to be able to do that. And World of Warcraft MMOs, they're an excellent example of that, like you said from earlier. As a infrequent World of Warcraft player that has been dragged into play with my buddies, I want to be able to find people to play a raid with easily. As a hardcore World of Warcraft player in my guild that started playing all the way back in the early 2000s, I want to be clamoring in the public forum looking for game. And
yeah.
being able to do both is what a great games as a service does because it is self-serve, fitting each player's needs rather than one size fits all for the amorphous average player.
100%, 100%. And sometimes you can only do one of the two. I think I have to say, like, because by allowing for that functionality, all of a sudden everyone will the player base will go towards that because it's easier, and I think it's more appealing from a time base. But then it kind of kills that ability for people to communicate and meet new people, and there's that organic kind of feeling. So, but I completely agree that that is part of kind of being a product manager, especially for a live service game. Um, I do want to bring up one thing, which is I've learned a lot about Agile. I just historically teaching product and just learning more about Agile, but also how Agile works in a gaming company because it's not necessarily straightforward. And you speak to some producers and they do not like it. Um, but I've also had the opportunity to teach it in my work, but also kind of get taught Agile from a professional Agile instructor, and it was always like a bit of a back and forth. I'd be like, you say this, and sometimes it ends up being very dogmatic in terms of how to approach a product and how to term kind of how people should work and what people should be doing, and they have their very specific terminologies. And
Mm.
how in your experience, because I think a lot of people applying for game roles today are thinking, I need to know all this Agile stuff and these methodologies. And for me it's just so much just allow the teams to govern themselves and become better and to become more efficient, and giving them the playground to be able to do that without kind of a top pressure of people coming in and trying to micromanage their improvement. You're allowing for them to do it themselves. What is Agile to you in gaming, and what is your experience with it?
Yeah, it's a bit like jobs to be done. It's a framework. I think I read a post on LinkedIn a while ago. I sent some buddies from one of the founding members of the Scrum Alliance, which said, it's a framework. Take what you want and leave the rest. You don't have to do all the rituals, and doing this is actually foolhardy. And I also, yeah, have had my certifications before and let them lapse, right? And have been instructed, and that was something that stuck with me in that a too rigorous an application of any one framework for something like making games, which is done by, sometimes a very large group of very diverse specialists, is doomed to fail because there is no one size fits all. So, the bits of Agile I really like are focusing on the customer, the player, rather than on the milestone or the gate or something arbitrary like time. Focusing on reducing, the time to start. How can we learn this as fast as possible, as cheaply as possible? It's a question that I like to ask in games. Sometimes there's no easy answer, but starting with that can sometimes lead to some great opportunities. And I also like the again, this is the very manager way of thinking, but I like that it strips away a lot of the need for complicated documentation, and you can get to results faster. That builds up its own debt. But sometimes I do think there's great benefit in saying, could we start with just this question rather than let's do the research and write the design doc and shape the feature and then discuss if we want to make it. And, a producer that I used to work with, a guy called Lewis, he's a great guy. And I remember we bumped heads and I said, could we start the work with just a post-it note? And felt like a crazy question at the time. But we sort of pushed through, and it for our team, because we'd all been working on that game for a while and it was in live and we knew how to do things intuitively, the answer was yes. And for us, that worked. And it was more effective for our team to say, okay, the question is, could we put an ad zone here? And the answer from the tech team is yes, give me 2 days and I'll get you something you can look at. That is something that you enable by at least stealing and borrowing from something like Agile than if you only apply a waterfall methodology or you stick to some other, in-house way of working. But like everything, I think try it out, see what you like, keep those bits, and remember it's team level, right? A whole organization running on a single process. I've been there before. It's really painful. Content teams are going to work so differently to feature teams, to live teams, to your IT and support teams. You're going to start asking the office management and operations team to have their own Kanban board for when to order the coffee and the planning for the Christmas party. Some places maybe. Is that right? Probably not. Right. So I think still the bits you like, try it out, and definitely embrace. Could we reduce our time?
And yeah, let's chat again soon. And if anyone has any advice, please just reach out, ask some comments. I think there's so much more to talk about on this, but thank you again.
Dude, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Really, really good fun. Great questions. Had a blast talking to you today.
Appreciate you, man.